Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Satisfying Software. Today, I have with me Diana Montalion. She is a system architect, founder of Mentrix, and author of the book Learning Systems Thinking. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you. I think it's wonderful. Any opportunity to talk about this stuff with you is a joy day.
Yes. So let's immediately start with a meta question. In your book, you wrote, being right is always temporary. What do you mean by that?
I love that you picked that out. It's something I struggle. Another way I say it is that every solution has to be defeasible, meaning we also need to know when it is no longer the solution, and that
Mm-hmm.
one of the things early in my career when we're looking for solutions is that we're looking for the right solution. And it was a little bit easier in monolithic software situations because there was a pretty big constraint in the box of software, and we would understand users and we'd understand budget and functionality. But as complexity has increased and continues to increase increasingly, everything depends on the context. What is a right thing in one organization could be completely wrong in another. And what's right today in for the reasons that I need to do something today, and there are reasons why it's a priority. A week from now might still be right, but it's not a priority anymore. When things change around your correctness, it may or may not be correct anymore. And that ability to not need rightness to be concrete that lasts for 100 years is part of the flexibility of systems architecture. Um, you can be very correct for some period of time, and that's all you get.
Yes, I think one of the things I have noticed in companies is that very often, and that's sort of why I love that sentence so much, is that we go in as consultants, and we look at the current situation, look at the current context of everything that's happening. And you notice the decisions or the ways of working, or the way of delivering the software. Basically, everything was based on this decision that happened 5 or 10 years ago, and it's no longer accurate because and they never questioned it again. It's like decision's been made. Um, we're going to keep doing this forever.
Yeah.
Um,
And in fairness, I think it's also just not the way our minds work. Like, it's shocking to me how often I am struggling to make a decision and discover that I have old thinking still running in my head, and that I never noticed it. Like, I never noticed that I'm just using a heuristic that only applied. So I think also why I write about that in the book is we also need support and some mechanisms to remind us to look and see, what was this based on? Like, what's our core mental model here? Like, what's our belief or our value that's instructing us? And it's pretty easy for teams often to look at it and then decide if it's still appropriate. I think it's harder to remember to look at it and see if it's still appropriate. And I just went through a process of car buying in the US. And oh my God, did I run into so many of those things, right? So many, this brand is bad. And they're not anymore. Now they're great in a particular instance, or this is how you negotiate, and so at one point, I'm getting overwhelmed by this. I really didn't have the cognitive load to do this. So that way was dragons. And I was in a discussion with Jessica Kerr, and she said, "It's not an existential crisis, Diana. It's a car." And it reminded me, what I learn from you every time I see you talk, which is that the thing about a decision is, what does it cost you to be wrong? And that remembering to do that math and deciding, are you willing to? And once I did that with the car, and it was just a car, I actually found that I didn't need to be right. I just needed to make the best decision I could make now. And then interestingly, a whole bunch of kismet happened and ended up with the exact right thing at the right price. Like it just opened up all the synchronicity that sometimes happens. But I often just forget.
Yeah, that's true. I think so. You don't like the term systems thinking. You call it non-linear thinking because you say that what we do is so much more than just thinking in systems. It's more. And I feel that part of it is question your beliefs as often as possible. We try to have, we often confuse belief and truth, I feel. There's truth. We have science, we have facts, there's truth there. And we try to have our belief system as close as possible to the truth, but truth changes, and so should our belief system because of that. And I feel that that's a very difficult thing to do, right? Because we get stuck with the beliefs that we had based on truths that are no longer true. And then you have these, yeah, horrible discussions where you have to convince people that you're not telling the truth, you're sharing your belief, and your belief has to be updated because the truth has changed.
Yeah, and in systems, this is inescapable because what we really don't realize, right, is the call is coming from inside the house. Whatever situation we're in right now, our software system exists based on our core mental models, our values and beliefs, and then the structures and patterns that we built to generate outcomes. Then things change. And then we think, well, if I just add Kubernetes, I'll fix it. But we have to change those beliefs, the core mental models that shape the system. Sometimes we get lucky. Sometimes we've already done that. We've already seen that we've moved from, um, a more linear choreography, writing to the database and back to an asynchronous choreography. We're thinking about events, and so we've kind of already shifted those models. But we'll get tripped up somewhere in that process, and it's one of the reasons it's very hard to do is that we're not taught that metacognition, awareness of how we learn and change our core thinking and beliefs and how we reason, how we come to conclusions. We're not taught that that is a fundamental STEM skill. But from my point of view, it's impossible to architect systems and design systems without that because you are always operating in, if you're involved in change outside of you, you're involved in change inside of you. They go together, right? Like you're a part of that system. And so um, the, the most impactful thing we can ever do is change the mindset out of which a system's goals, power structures, um, rules, governance arose. So, in other words, the most powerful thing we can do is change the core belief or value structure. And I even get a little stuck on truth because, for example, um, there's all these truths. If you had a baby 30 years ago, there's all these truths about what we know from science. Some of them aren't true anymore. Were they true then? They were just what we knew. Also, when it comes to what to do with babies, it's so trendy and half of it doesn't really matter. Like you get this, like, oh, you have to buy this product to get this thing. And so what is actually true and what is not true but well currently believed, and what is kind of true but not relevant, but it's gotten raised up to be very important when in fact it isn't. That in and of itself is a whole um chat difficult. That's probably the hard part, right? Is figuring out sorting truth even if you know what it is.
Yes. Yeah, like depends on which definition of truth you're working with here. For me, it's whatever information is available at that point in time. If in 5 years from now, I'm proven or science does new research and it's proven that that's no longer correct, then right now I still feel like I'm functioning with the truth because I can't know that it's going to be proven wrong in 5 years. So
Exactly, right? That's
yeah,
and we've come full circle. Temporarily,
yes.
like it's okay to be temporarily right. And for me, one of the things that I've dived into even more deeply is how, mm, if we look at a particular situation through a very limited frame, then there are going to be patterns of unknown unknowns that are always there. So, for example, um, if we only study, if we only study uh, people with a certain genetic heritage in order to understand a particular disease,
Mhm.
and then we say, this is how it is. But we don't know that. We just know that in this circumstance it is. And so there's a lot of it. There's like only men were involved in the discussion, and this is the truth. Well, but what happens if it wasn't limited into a particular group of people? And we can never not have that. Like we're always looking for through a frame that's going to be limited. We can never avoid that. But also we want to design the ability to true from what point of view? Like, how did we reach this conclusion? Who reached this conclusion? What information did they take in when they reached this conclusion? And then that, for me anyway, that helps with relevancy too. Like that, um, if you have like in tech, for example, if the entire team has spent 15 years in CRUD software, right, a very particular CRUD software, and they're making a recommendation, then I can presume that missing from the truth might be other technologies and other pattern approaches that might also be relevant here because it isn't something this particular team would necessarily explore. Same as if you have a team that has no experience with that type of software, and that could be the easiest choice, but they didn't recommend it because it's not familiar to them. I think that's true universally as well, right? And not bad. It's not bad. That's unavoidable, but something to look at too. What didn't we what where didn't we go for truth and insight? What didn't we ask? Who didn't we ask?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get to the truth, you are always limited to the people in the room, anyways.
Mhm.
Even if that is a thinking party of one.
Now my head is singing the Hamilton song "Room Where It Happens." This is another thing. Like if I can translate anything into a Hamilton song, my mind will immediately do it. It's quite entertaining. I'm not going to
Yeah,
sing though, because
I feel this podcast is a success because I exceeded exceeded triggering that specific.
it's and with teams, I feel like I have come to measure the quality of team and the solutions and things we're working on based on how quickly it brings up Hamilton in my head. No science behind it, but I think it's a real measure.
It is absolutely. Um, so what we talked about now, mostly for the past 5 minutes, is knowledge flow, right?
Yeah.
In comparison to knowledge stock, eh? What you know and how how well you're willing to change what you know. That's how I formulate it in my head. Um, and the knowledge flow is a hell of a lot more difficult than knowledge stock because changing people's belief systems or their truths or their perspectives, I don't know what your experience has been, um, but till this day, I still struggle with that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, it might be temporary. We'll see. But I've pretty much come to the conclusion that I can't change anyone else's mind. Like this whole change hearts and minds, I actually can't do that. We can only change our own mind. So there has to be that willingness. I personally am developing the skill to be able to, um, to change my thinking as I'm introduced to more information, but I'm also able to discern whether the more information is valuable to consume or not. Like, because not everything is equal. But what we can do, though, is create a system of support, create the expectation that we use our knowledge to generate more knowledge, which is what we do when we build software. Software is knowledge. I mean, we literally put it in production. We take knowledge and we put it in production. And that, so when we're doing that with our whatever skills we have, whatever experience we have and knowledge we have, we're actually putting it into the world to some end, to some benefit. And we the challenge is that we're taught from day one to pursue knowledge stock, to pass, to show that you know something by passing an exam, by getting a job, by passing a whiteboard test. And it isn't that what we know or can prove that we know isn't valuable. It's just not systemically valuable. Like the question isn't what you know, but what is the positive impact of what you know? And how does what you know, how does what I know mixed with what you know combine to form something, a third thing that neither of us would have been able to come up with alone? That's really that's the magic, right? Is when you're able to synthesize. But we have so little experience of it, and we're so taught to value knowledge stock, and we're so taught to make decisions hierarchically, the trickle down thinking theory, where someone thinks and then passes it down to people who implement, and the implementers don't actually have to understand the context or the reasoning or why this matters, which of course they do if you want them to give you something valuable. So we're we're nascent in this way, right? A lot. We're even just trying to find the words to describe the difference between a knowledge flow experience and a knowledge stock experience, and what the balance is between them. And it's challenging. And then people have an experience where the flow isn't a flow, it's a gush of just tons of thinking and information. Everybody has an opinion about everything all the time and nothing gets done. That's not knowledge flow either. That's something
Yeah,
else. That's knowledge drowning, I guess.
it's yeah, knowledge tornadoes. They
Ooh,
don't
I
do
like that.
anything.
Like Sharknado of information. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I do feel that being a person that, constantly questions my own thought patterns, and in a room always question when people are considering us the truth, and like why and why do you believe that and where does that come from and what do you think? I sometimes feel it puts you in the underdog position. People are far more likely to listen someone who talks in certainties than someone who talks in uncertainties. And I most definitely talk in uncertainties. It's like could be a good solution. Not sure yet. Feel like I don't have enough information. Um, so how do you what advice would you give someone, you with a lot more experience than me? What would you give as advice to say that we have to constantly question ourselves? At the same time, we need to be confident at what we do. How do you
Yeah.
deal with that?
That's a great question. And it is especially challenging for people who are, I'll say, like, who don't look like what you expect a software professional to look like, tend to struggle with that question even more because they tend to need to prove it even more, but not always. I think it's something we all wrestle with. And what I can say is that it's very easy, especially early in your career, to always try and keep up with the knowledge stock, to get involved in the contest of knowledge. And I don't think it's really a bad thing necessarily because, I mean, you do learn a lot and it is part of what we do. But after a while, it just felt like swagger. Like it felt like it was sort of, it didn't have a maturity to it, right? It's, I mean, yay, but also, mm, I'm trying to solve my whole career has been about going into situations where we don't know what to do. That's why my team and I are engaging. And so I very rarely had the luxury of, and I know what to do because we had to figure it out. And so that really was a good advantage because it didn't reinforce the value of knowledge talk, but I still had it, right? I still wanted to prove myself. What I have discovered though is that I get much more of what I need. And often what I need is the money to back up. If I have a recommendation, I need the money to do it and I need the green light to do it. Like, and also if I'm interested in doing something hard, I need the people that are doing it to trust that they can bring me in and I can work with them on it. Is not the confidence that I know, but the ability to say, here's my recommendation, and here's what convinced me. Here are the options I considered. Here is the criteria I was using. Here is why it's very connected to the value in this system. Like it's going to meet the business goals, which I quote. I call it this systemic reasoning. There are other names for it, but the better I got at making trustworthy recommendations, not right, just trustworthy. They were sound, right? You could follow. If I said, this is what I think and this is why, you'd be like, sure, that makes sense. Even if you disagree with me, you'd understand why I came to that conclusion. Is so much more powerful long term, so much more beneficial long term than being the 10x developer, the smartest person in the room. And so it requires more patience. It definitely requires more vulnerability. It requires knowing that people will mistake you for someone who doesn't know and they won't respect that. But my experience is that's not who you're really looking to connect with or convince anyway. And people recognize sound reasoning when they experience it. So after a while, people start to ask you, so Diana, what do you think? Whereas in the beginning, no, you could scream it and skywrite it and no one would listen. And so I think having the really working on the skill of knowing what the best possible conclusion might be in this situation rather than being right, which is funny that we've come full circle with this, but having impact, having influence because you work to really think about and construct and understand why something matters and who it matters to. Um, it's the slower road, but it is, I wouldn't trade. I would not trade. I wouldn't trade this road, not now. Um, mm-mm.
I'll keep on it then.
Right. And like, you know, you and I know this, right? Is that, and you need other people around you that are doing it. If you're trying doing it in isolation, you're going to think you're the only person in the whole world who thinks like you do. And people have told me that no one thinks like you, Diana. Um, I can often be the outlier, the scapegoat, and now I know that is not true at all. But it took a while in my career to find the other people who were also out there trying to do this. And you need those people. You can't do this alone. You really can't. So building community, um, and support for yourself is, yeah, really, really essential to it too. Yeah.
It is because I feel that you're always either, pushing the card or pulling the card. As consultants, as systemical thinkers, you're always doing sort of that, or it feels often like that's what you're doing. Like you have to push, you have to pull. So even if it's, like here, I have my colleagues, I can vent a bit. I can talk ideas about them. They can say that they're great, or they can say where I'm thinking wrong. And it's not with the customers, because there I still have to pull and push all the time. Um, but it is, and I don't mean pull and push in a negative way. It's
Right.
just that you're trying to teach people something, and teaching them, it takes a while. To get there. I was the same when I was 20 years old. But the fact that I do have that, and that we have the systems community, where we can also go chat about frustrating topics, that really, really helps.
It does. And also, we don't know. Like, one of the things, people, and it doesn't matter like whether I'm on staff or whether I've been brought in, to consult, whatever, like wherever I've been, whatever my relationship with an organization is or with a team is, whether I'm the engineering lead, so everyone actually works for me, or I'm on the team as an engineer, doesn't really matter. The whole, right, in that we are always, um, we're always trying to think differently, because in order to push something different to production, we have to think differently about the thing, right? About what we're trying to do. And we we work in, um, the legacy of Taylorism, meaning the scientific management, these very linear, control, Gantt chart, hierarchical, industrial ways of working. So we're knowledge workers in an industrial landscape. And so they don't fit together. And also systems don't fit into to reductionistic linearization. Like you can't, um, the thing that the effect in the system is between the parts, right? Just like if the bug is in the code, that's great, but the bug is often in eventual consistency or caching layers or somewhere in these relationships, right? And that's true with people as well. And so because that's the world that we're working in, we weren't educated for that. And most of us built monolithic software, at least for a while, where we had some of it, but we didn't need it. And now, as relational complexity increases, and we have, clusters and microservices, and all software talks to other software and create once, publish everywhere, all of these things, distributed systems. Now, suddenly we have to have solutions and proven ways of working, and we really don't yet. So I think we get support from each other, but also we don't have a vocabulary to call the challenges we have. We don't have a vocabulary to help organizations who are trying to transform understand how to find the core mental models that need to change. Like, we're all stumbling around trying to figure this out. So we need each other to figure out what the heck to do now, because there isn't a template that's going to help us. It's just experience, right?
It is, yeah. Like, and the thing for me at least is as well, so you get this whole bunch of information thrown at you. And I am conscious of a lot of my thought patterns. But you said, if you can explain how you came to a certain conclusion, if people will think that at least you're trustworthy. But it takes a while, because I come to a conclusion and then I have to completely backtrack. It's like, well, I spoke to project managers and that's what they said. And I spoke to software developers and that's what they said. And then I talked to some tech leads and they said something else. And so I honestly think that whatever methodology you're introducing is going to fix your problem, because you're all thinking the wrong problem right now. And then they're like, why? And it's like, give me a couple of hours. I'll get it to you.
Right.
um, and that's also hard, because it's not like you consciously reason through everything. It's just that, the back of your brain, while I listen to people and have conversations, the back of my brain is just updating my models, my mental models of everything, and how that company functions and how the software system functions. And all of a sudden there's a red light.
Yeah.
And then you're like, no, we should pause that decision because that's not going to work. Why? I don't know yet.
Right? Exactly this. So and Einstein said the role of intuition in science, like that. I describe it as the monkey cymbals. There's a wind up toy of a monkey that bangs the cymbals and you wind it up and the monkey bang. That's what's happening in me. Like monkey cymbal. Now this doesn't help anybody. I just know it's monkey cymbals. The monkey cymbals, the red light, as you say, is very rarely wrong, but it is always wrong in the first conclusion about why it's going off that it comes to, right? And that's the truth too for most of us. Like if we have to explain it, we don't really know. And that the the process of understanding, and it's why when you said, that I don't love systems thinking as the whole name, because systems thinking is part of critical thinking, and one of the reasons is because pattern thinking is inextricable, meaning what you're hearing people talk about different things, but what you're picking up on is the patterns. There is still a relationship between what these three parts are saying, and these relationships between them is pointing to another thing that is a pattern that's impacting them, and they don't know necessarily to say, oh, that pattern is impacting us. But they can tell you the symptom they get as a result of that pattern, like, you know, um, oversimplified monthly deployment. If you ask people their pain, they might say monthly deployment, but they're more likely to tell you about slowness and frustration and like these things that happen that you have to just sort of find your way to. It's the pattern of how quickly things move to production is a big part of this. And then for me is the same. I don't know yet. Like, and Janella Meadows says the same thing. She's like, a system I don't know. I mean, I have to dance with it. Like, I have to be with it for a bit. You can't know just from the other system. It's like if you were a doctor, you don't say, oh, you have cold symptoms. So you have the exact same cold that the person before you had. The person might have COVID, the person might have allergies, the person, like, there's a lot of things that would go with the same symptoms. So and the patterns are all in the relationships between the parts and also the relationships between the individual parts in a system, whether it's a person, a team, or software, and the context in which they're in, right? Sometimes it's world the world is changing patterns, and that's causing pressure on an organization, which is causing pressure between the teams, and it doesn't have anything to do with decisions they're making. It's that they used to sell typewriters. Nobody wants typewriters. You can't make people want typewriters. You have to adapt, and that pressure is external as much as internal, right? So I feel you. It's so, what is it, to show your work, like in math where you come to the answer, you have to show your work. We have to do that. We have to show our work, and I say it blithely, show your work, but it's the hardest thing.
Yeah, I have learned to sort of, like, I'd say, this is what my intuition is telling me. That's not going to solve anything. Um, but I need a bit of time to figure out why my intuition is telling me that. And people respond very nicely to that. Because I'm not blatantly saying, like, I'm not talking from a belief to, I'm not saying, no, I'm not sharing my opinion. Like, there's something here, and even me, I want to figure out why my intuition is telling me this. And I could be wrong. I mean, I could go through all the hoops and saying, well, no, actually, my intuition was telling me something that's off. And I have to agree with you. That's a good solution, anyways. And sometimes that's the conclusion I reach. But that does help.
Yeah, and it's often too, um, and I see this so I've had a few conversations with my engineering cohorts, and there's an idea that's sort of giving me that, oh, not quite right, and that the more I can figure out sort of what's on my mind, it's often the person that said a thing that started me feeling doubtful that helps me come up with the thing that satisfies whatever it is that I'm feeling. That it's again not about wrong and right. It's often just about looking at a problem from a similar direction or from different directions, and also that um, there might be they might have looked at a problem from the left, through this window, and I'm looking at it through this window. And when I can make this window clear, it's really easy for them to go, oh yeah, okay, we could just this other thing instead. And then that works great. So it isn't even we tend to dissociate like, oh, this team is wrong and we'll go fix it out and do this. But it often the answer is inside the conversation. So I have to go away and gather myself and create some conceptual integrity for myself so that I can be visible in the conversation and then go back and have it. And often we get we get to the better idea together pretty quickly. I think too often people go right to command and control. Like, oh, that's wrong, and we need to fix. Give them a chance. They give me a
Yes.
chance. I'm wrong a lot. I come in with an idea that they're like, well, that can work, but that can definitely not work. And everybody gives me a chance to be better. As a matter of fact, we think of feedback as a racy model, and it makes me so sad. And we also think of feedback as get everybody's opinion. Don't need your opinion. That doesn't help me. I need why, how did you reach that conclusion? What is it about um, what is it that convinced you to say this? And what I need more than anything is for people who can help strengthen my thinking, like a good code review. I don't want to put code out in the world or a book out in the world that had no editor or copy editor. Like I want that. I want to know where I'm wrong, and I want people to help me with that. And when we have the you're trying to be right kind of culture, you miss out on how much better you can be because other people, they're not in your head. They weren't writing. You know how it is. You write the code, you've written all the code, and there's one really obvious change that you could make, and you can't see it because you don't have space anymore. But they do. And that's why we're better as a team often, right? But it relies on the deep work. You have to gather your own thinking first. You can't just do it. I can't anyway, out loud.
Yeah, I can't do that either. Um, so that leads me into our next section of the podcast, which is called Rant Away, where I give you a few minutes to talk a bit about problems that you still see. System thinking is becoming more and more popular if people are interested in the topic. That has been my experience. But I'm sure that there are still some problems with it as well. So I'm going to give you some time and space to talk about that.
So here's a challenge with this question is that I live in the US, which means that I am watching the Godzilla of systems design at scale, which is the way that you design systems is to will them into existence or hack them off. And now, sometimes very hard decisions have to get made. Sometimes things have to be scaled back or scaled forward. System change is not comfortable. And it is true that often we avoid change because we want to play nice or whatever. And so I don't have a binary. I'm not trying to make a binary argument. But at the same time that we're seeing more subtlety and nuance, more ability to come to a conclusion that improves a system without um, without a need for bullying or command and control. We can sort of figure it out. We can learn. We can experiment. I've been doing this 25 years, and I would say in the last 5 years, the increase in interest in that, like you're saying, is nearly exponential. Like suddenly we understand that almost everything is a systems problem. I think that COVID also helped us understand because we saw systems impacted by one thing and then what happened. Simultaneously, I'm in the middle of seeing things like we'll impose these massive tariffs and absolutely everything will be fine. And there are so many impacts, systemic impacts from this, and many of them not even really considered in the decision that happens. And it creates this giant mess that is going to have to be cleaned up. And we might, whether we cheer the original decision or not, the amount of understanding the impact, what is impacted, who is impacted, that missing reasoning, that missing discourse, social discourse, um, is maddening. It's nails on a chalkboard, maddening. And this is not, I mean, I can give examples from all political spectrums and all this, though right now it is most visible in the most visibleness aspect. Um, but the idea that there's a simple demand answer, I can make a demand and that will solve these very complex systems problems, is it almost gives me an upset stomach because it just is so not the case. It's so not the case. And I really look forward, I really look forward to nuance more like that. Um, I want to take bold action. I like transformation, but I need it to be reasoned and thoughtful, and it matters. Impact matters, and humanity matters, and um, intelligence is in the nuance, in the systemic, in being able to understand complexity, not drown complexity in an ocean of words. That doesn't work. So I don't know. It's a little incendiary, but for a systems thinker, I can't not say that. Like right now, this is like in American software world, this is a really big deal. Not so much in Europe, which is why I'm mostly in Europe when I'm doing this, but I guess
No, I took
sigh.
what you're saying. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful answer. To see what you tried so hard to get somewhere in the software industry, and then you turn around and somewhere else. It's clearly not. They're not there yet. Yeah. So to end the podcast, the podcast is called Satisfying Software. So what does it mean for you when software is satisfying? What do you see?
So you ask the question, and my mind goes back to before I was full time in tech and before I was designing software systems and really had to think critically and scientifically about that answer and just think of myself sitting at my desk, right? And I think it's always been the same. Satisfying software is software I don't notice because I'm trying to do a thing and I'm able to do that thing. And I'm able to immerse in that thing. And I'm able to do that thing in a way that that works for me. I don't have to overthink where that button is or whatever. That satisfying software is software that, for the most part, I don't even notice the software. I just notice what I'm doing. That's valuable. That's my
That's
favorite.
such a nice answer. Thank you.
I'm glad you like it. I think that's and we getting, I mean, is software didn't really exist when I was a kid, and now it's everything and everywhere. And the better we're able to make software have good relationships to other software and other contexts and make it um, in good relationship to each other, I think the better the world's going to be. But we aren't there yet. Mhm.
No, we're not there yet, but we're helping, getting us there. Um, so thank you so much for joining us, Diana, and for this lovely conversation. And to the listeners and watchers on YouTube, I hope to see you all in the next episode.